Hello everyone, this is Miss Wills here, and we're going to be focusing today on Act 5, Scene 5 on Macbeth. So just to start, I would like you to think back to last lesson when we looked at Act 5, Scene 4, and I'd like you to try and answer this question in your notes, please. How does Siward describe Macbeth in Act 5, Scene 4? So I'd like you to pause this recording and try to answer that. Okay. So Siward describes Macbeth in Act 5, Scene 4 as a confident tyrant. And we talked about this last lesson when we discussed whether or not we thought Macbeth actually was a confident tyrant. Of course, earlier in the play, he was full of anxieties and fear. But at this point, it seems that the witch's prophecies, although still did make him feel anxious about Macduff in many ways, also helped him feel a bit more secure in his role because he now feels that no man can actually kill him because he say none of woman born can harm Macbeth. So he is quite confident in that respect, and we're going to continue looking at this in today's lesson. So we're now going to focus on Act 5, Scene 5, and what I'd like you to do is to pause this recording and watch the clip. Once you've done that, I then would like you to highlight on Act 5, Scene 5 the following. So firstly, where does Macbeth appear to be the confident tyrant? Where does he appear to be confident? And secondly, where does this sense of confidence dwindle? So where does he lose the sense of confidence in this scene? So please again, pause this recording and carry out that task, please. Okay, what I'm going to show you now is a graph, and what I'd like you to do is plot Macbeth's journey in Act 5 so far on this graph. Now, the scale on the side here is from very confident to no confidence at all. So you are plotting on here basically Macbeth's confidence level throughout Act 5. And at the bottom, you've got quotes. These quotes are in the correct order. Now, what I'd like you to do is I would like you to plot your graph, and then I would like you to write next to each point why you've placed that quote there or that moment there on the confidence scale. So can you please carry out that task and pause this recording? Okay, so I'm just going to show you what mine looks like, and yours might look similar or slightly different. But in terms of kind of supporting what you've seen with the sort of explanation, I'm going to go through these quite quickly. So for the first quote here, this is in Act 5, Scene 3, where Macbeth says, "The mind I sway by and the heart I bear shall never sag with doubt nor shake with fear." So this is just really him reflecting on after he's seen the witches and what they've told him, he kind of feels a lot more secure in his role and, you know, a lot more confident that no harm's going to come his way. This sense of confidence is further echoed in Act 5, Scene 4, when Siward calls him a confident tyrant. And even at the beginning of Scene 5, he still seems pretty confident, doesn't he, that his castle will not be breached, that whatever battle may ensue, he will actually win. However, we then have the death of Lady Macbeth, which is signified by the cries of the women in the castle. And this is when Macbeth tells us he almost forgot the taste of fears. Now this, for me, the cry of the women kind of brings Macbeth back to reality and drags him down to earth a little bit, because this is when he realizes and reflects on the point that, you know, well, actually he has become more confident, has forgot the taste of fears, but he says he almost has. So he recognizes that there are still some fears there, and this is what these screams have made him realize, perhaps. And of course, I'd say this confidence declines even more when he finds out his wife has died, and he starts to actually ponder and wonder about the meaning of life, and it's just pointless, and the futility of life. And you know, it's quite a somber tone at this point, and it kind of feels like he's given up on life in a sense. And then again, the confidence drops even further when he finds out that Birnam Wood has come to Dunsinane. So this is when he realised that he is about to die, because this is what the witch has prophesied as well. Now, what I've done for the last quote, you could argue either way, really. He says, at least we'll die with harness on our backs. You could argue that here he is not confident he's going to win. He thinks he's going to die. But you could also argue in the same breath, he kind of faces death with confidence. He faces it bravely, with pride, because he's basically going to die fighting. He is going to be that sort of valiant, that brave warrior that he was and what he was described as at the beginning of the play. So what we're going to turn to next is thinking about Lady Macbeth's death. Okay, so obviously it's a really, really important moment in the play. And what I'd like you to do is in your own notes, I'd like you to answer the following questions. So what is the impact of Lady Macbeth's death? How does Macbeth react? And why is her death off stage? So I'd like you to pause this recording again, please, and to get your ideas down. Okay, so let's go through some ideas. So firstly, what is the impact of Lady Macbeth's death? Well, of course it is shocking because it's another character who has died. But again, it is probably to be expected, and audience probably expects it because of Act 5, Scene 1, when we see Lady Macbeth in her sleepwalk, and we see that, and the doctor says really there's no turning back for her, and they're really, really worried about her health. But it is quite shocking how it has been foreshadowed earlier on in the play. It emphasizes the idea of the Macbeths being doomed, and in destroying natural order of things, they have also destroyed themselves. And that's kind of what's happened here of Lady Macbeth's death, and perhaps it also foreshadows what is to come for Macbeth as well. It also highlights the power of guilt, this guilt that she mocked Macbeth for earlier in the play. It has now driven her to kill herself. So it kind of highlights that as well. The next question, how does Macbeth react? Well, he says, she should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word. So he regrets the fact that his wife is dead, but also regrets the fact that he doesn't actually have time to mourn her and grieve for her because he's too busy fighting for his own life and his own survival. And of course, this leads him to contemplate life and the pointlessness of it, just how short life is, how fragile life is as well. And the point of life now, because he no longer has his wife, the woman he wanted to share his power with. And finally, why is her death off stage? Well, there could be a number of reasons for this. The first is to possibly make sure her death doesn't take away from the final action of the play. So we want the focus to be on Macbeth's character and this battle that's about to take place, rather than us being too concerned about Lady Macbeth. It also may be because if we see her death on stage, we might actually feel more sympathy for Macbeth at a time when really we should be kind of rooting for his death and demise. And it possibly symbolises just how removed from the action she is now. I mean, at the beginning of the play, she was very much involved in the action. She was manipulating Macbeth. She was driving him to carry out the murderous actions. Yet, since then, she hasn't really played any part in Macbeth's murder, in the Macduff family's murder. It seems to be that Macbeth has taken control now. So it just shows that she's totally no part of the action anymore. Okay, so moving on. A stage direction that is quite important, I believe, in this scene is the cry of women. Now, I would like you to also get these notes down, please. I think it's interesting to note that this cry of women is what alerts Macbeth of his wife's passing. It kind of brings him to a little bit and drags him back down to reality. But the screams of the women off stage reconnect, I think, Lady Macbeth to the feminine world she left earlier in the play when she asked the spirits to unsex her and make her more masculine and more aggressive. I possibly think that this is just another example of the natural order being restored at the end of this play here. That, in trying to get rid of her masculinity, that was destroying the femininity, was destroying the natural order of things, but now everything is being restored to what it was, as we see later in the play again when Macbeth is killed as well. Okay, so moving on from Lady Macbeth's death. In this scene, we have a very, very famous soliloquy from Macbeth. Now, what I'd like you to do is I would like you to write down the definition for soliloquy in your notes, please. So a soliloquy is basically an actor speaking one's thoughts aloud when one is by oneself or regardless of any hearers, especially by a character in a play. So it is a character in a play talking about their thoughts, about their desires, their emotion, and we learn a lot from a character through the soliloquies. And of course, we do have quite a few soliloquies in Macbeth as well. The soliloquy in this scene is the tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow soliloquy, and is really, really important in terms of what this tells us about Macbeth's state of mind at this point. So Macbeth is alone at this point on the stage. So why do we think this is important? Well, firstly, it kind of emphasizes the fact that he is very much isolated and alone. He doesn't have, anyone to help him now. His teammate who helped him plot the king's murder, she is gone. He is very much alone. His own army are kind of leaving him now as well. So it does emphasize a sense of isolation he might be feeling. Perhaps it does make an audience feel some sort of sympathy towards him again. So looking a little bit more closely at the soliloquy, there is a metaphor embedded within the soliloquy, and I want you to identify it, and I would like you just to write down what you think this metaphor means. What is Macbeth saying here? What is Shakespeare trying to highlight? So if you could please just pause this recording to get your ideas down. Okay, so the metaphor we have here is the idea of life being a performance and that we're all poor players on a stage. So what we have here is Macbeth highlighting the futility of life. He's questioning the point of it, in this idea that we're all bound for the grave and the life we leave behind ends up not really meaning anything. It's just pointless. So he's kind of realized now when he does die, his power diminishes and it leaves with him. So what was the point in it all? He doesn't have anyone now to share this power with because his wife is now dead. So all he's done is essentially for nothing as well. And he's realizing this here. It also indicates we all play certain roles in society that are never truly ours. So it's kind of like we're puppets, and the puppet master, of course, is God. And we cannot go against God because at the end of the day, God controls us. So God is going to restore the natural order of things, which he started to do with the death of Lady Macbeth, and of course does with the death of Macbeth as well. Okay, so moving on. I would now like you to pinpoint where there is repetition in this soliloquy and also what the effect of the use of repetition is as well. So if you can please just pause this again and carry out that activity. Okay, so repetition is used a few times in here. Of course, we've got the tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow famous line there. So we have that word tomorrow repeated. So really the meaning of this phrase, it's just to emphasize the idea of life being meaningless, empty. It just every day creeps by, you cannot control it. And after his wife dies, it seems him time is just a burden. And the idea of tomorrow and what's to come is overwhelming for him. This idea of the future is quite a big theme throughout Macbeth, especially with the witches, because they're all looking at fate and telling Macbeth what his fate is as well. Okay, guys, I'm running out of time with this clip, so I'm going to stop this clip here, but the second half of this lesson will be on the next clip, so if you can just get those notes down and please click on the next clip. Thank you for listening.